Thank you. Now we continue with our distinguished panelists. We will now hear from Dr. Monica, who is the Executive Coordinator of the Initiative for Science in Europe. Dr. Monica Dietl will be sharing their insights on researcher mental health in times of crisis, disasters, and wars.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here, even if the travel was long, but I'm here. I still believe that face-to-face is really important, even if you are not very numerous, you are here, so thank you very much. And thank you for the connection to internet. The first thing I wanted to say before going to my presentation, which is quite an institutional presentation, is that we need researchers. We need people doing research. When I say we, is the citizens and the societies and the countries, because research is really a basic activity which creates values and which allows a country to make progress. And this is something we should say much more often, because one of the difficulties we are confronted to is then whether government or the European Commission and the other European institutions need to put money for research or for whatever on the table. The first budget will be cut is research very often. I mean, and of course in times of issues like we are having now, wars and earthquakes and other really terrible things which are happening, there is a need for money to help in these different situations, and the question is always, where do you cut? And in ISC we are very strongly defending the idea that we should shelter research, and in particular academic research, which we believe is very important. So I just wanted to say this a little bit in introduction. I will go relatively fast through my slides, and I will try to do some comments on presentations where I didn't capture everything, of course, because it was on Turkish, but I captured something on some slides thanks to the help of you both. So, yeah, so what is Initiative for Science in Europe? Just to explain you very quickly, it was initially an initiative from life science scientists who decided that there was a need to make a call to the political decision makers that there was need for a new program at European level, funding basic research. And at that time, it was in the early 2000s, they gathered several 10,000s of signatures. I mean, I saw one of the now retired researchers from that time some months ago who said we had some 400,000 signatures. It was printed on paper. We went to see the commissioner at that time and say we need a program for basic research. And that's what became the ERC. So that's how Initiative for Science in Europe started, with the idea we need to defend academic research, basic or exploratory research. Progressively, the members of this initiative became the learning societies, the scientific research organizations operating, and we are operating in a very multidisciplinary manner, because we believe that there is a need to speak in favor of all the research communities in all fields. So I already told that very quickly. So of course there are two core ideas in Initiative for Science in Europe. One is that if you want to convince policymakers on anything, you need to find out the mechanisms how to exercise science advice. Science advice, or / I say always science diplomacy, which is very tightly linked. And of course this is like evidence, but you need to find out how to speak to the political decision makers, how to take into account the overall context and not only speak isolatedly about your problems in science. We are talking about mental health in principle on this event, and typically we tend to forget when we talk with our concerns as researchers that other professions, other jobs, other communities outside research are confronted to the same problems. I mean, I have a lot of young nieces and nephews who are in very different professions, and I see how they suffer, how they have suffered from democratic issues, how they have suffered from the pandemic, how the Ukrainian war is impacting their lives, and so on. The second thing is that we believe we need to join forces. That means within the organization we try to re-increase the number of members so that we really ensure that we cover all interests in all research fields. But also we very much push for a kind of coalition, I will come back to this a bit later, among representative research associations, and I will come later back to that. We have 3 key policies. We just had the General Assembly, they were confirmed as the key policies we want to defend. I already mentioned advocating for academic research. So it was founded, IEC was founded on this idea of defending basic research and academic research. Widening participation, I don't know if you know, all of you, this notion of widening participation was put in place by the European Commission in the, not in the current, but in the former framework program Horizon 2020, which was the idea how, at that time, the initial discussions years before was the new member states of the European Union are disadvantaged, they don't have access to the funds of the European Union as easily as the former or older member countries. There were statistics at that time which already demonstrated it was half true, but there was an issue. So the Commission invented this widening participation program where there is a small budget, and in fact cost was put in charge of part of this political ambition that all researchers all over Europe and beyond the European Union member states should be able to participate to the movement of cooperation in Europe. And the last focus we have is the researchers' careers. We very much believe that this is basics of whatever we want to do around research, and there I will come back to that also a bit later. Then we have other key priorities. I didn't put the whole list, but 3 other key priorities. We need to follow up the Horizon Europe program because that's in fact, it's the 3rd budget of the European Union, so it's a bulk of money which is quite significant. And we have to take care and follow up that this money really is used for what is thought to be used. It means research, and now they added an innovation. But what it means is still a concern for all of us. The second thing which we believe is really important is the reform of the research assessment, which Brian already mentioned, this coalition for the research assessment reform, which was built through what we call a co-creation process between universities and other stakeholders and the European Commission, which came up to a kind of agreement, which now over 400 institutions have signed. Of course, not all. Not all, but many. Already 400 is quite a lot, and they are all engaged in the process. And the last thing is the Commission put in place what it has called the ERA Forum for Transmission, which is at the beginning was a platform with representatives from the EU member states and associated countries. And then ISC, together with some other representative associations, we got some representative positions within this platform for learned societies, for research representatives of stakeholders, universities. And that's a very heavy process, which is thought to think about the future of Europe in research, what we need. They have been building, well, let's say they agreed on a certain number of what they called actions, 24 on many different things. So there are actions also dealing with researchers' careers, for example, or with assessment. So we have to take care that all this has a sense and doesn't go to very different outcomes. And so we are engaged with representatives in these different platforms, and our idea is always to defend and to advocate for the active researchers' concerns. I will focus a little bit on the focus of researchers' careers. So what has ISE been doing in the last, let's say, 3 years? So first, it put in place a researchers' careers working group. We are putting in place working groups where the members are active researchers, mostly early career researchers from our member organizations. So to call you 4, you know, there is the Marie Curie Association, Alumni Association, there is Eurodoc, there is ICORSA, they were all mentioned on the slide of Brian because they all participate also to the ReMO action. And there is the Young Academy of Europe, which is the spin-off of the Academia Europea for young researchers. And they are all very active. So what gives us a very strong legitimacy compared to other associations represented in Brussels in particular, they have hired people. We don't have staff which work with the people who are in the field, because we believe that it's very important that this is renewed constantly because it evolves. The research careers and the situation of the young investigators evolve, and this has to be taken into account constantly. Then there was this famous pandemic, which brought ISC to publish a statement supporting a call for doing a study on the impact of the pandemic on early career researchers, which was done by the former president of the ERC, Jean-Pierre Bourguignon. And this led ISC to enter into discussions with Jean-Pierre Bourguignon, with Manuel Heitor, for those who don't know him. He's a researcher who has been for 7 years the research minister in Portugal. And just to give you a little background, in Portugal there was a former minister for research who was called Mariano Gago, who was also a scientist, a famous scientist in his field, working in CERN many years, who was from that time already supporting the problematics of we have to do something for young researchers. And Manuel Heitor somehow has taken up this challenge. Mariano Gago died relatively early because of a disease, and he is now really battling for that. And why I mention him is because he has been very hard and is very hard pushing for the Commission and other institutions for putting money on the table on that. And during the Portuguese presidency of the European Union, the problematics of researchers' careers and early researchers' careers in particular has come to a conclusion that something should be done. I will come back to this also later. And that's how you understand why then the Gago conference is mentioned, because when Gago died, there was a program created, and every year there is a Gago conference, and we had last year the Gago conference dedicated to young researchers' careers. And the outcome of that conference was the manifesto. And what happened in between, you have it on the slide, is that the war in Ukraine has started, and we said, well, there was the pandemic, now that it's over there is a new problem, which we don't know how long it will be, and then other problems came added to that. We had the chance that the European Commissioner, current European Commissioner for Education, Youth, Research, Innovation, Maria Gabriel, got interested into the manifesto. We had a small event in January where we handed over, and it was for her the opportunity to announce that in the last 1.5 years of her mandate, she really wants to put something on the table for his successor, which should become a program. We don't know yet exactly how, and we want to engage in that. And of course there is a link with this widening participation, how we make it happen, that everybody has access and can benefit of this kind of initiatives. Okay, so now little by little I'm coming to this mental health issue. COVID pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, which really was absolutely touching everybody. Democracy is in danger, which is more and more observed in many countries, including European member states of the European Union, and the general feeling children and young people and old people have on uncertainty. I mean, I didn't list the climate change and other issues we are all confronted to, which are like putting a pressure on all of us. Adding for the scientists, the precarious employment situations, the often poor working conditions or overload of work, I was just discussing during the break, the threatened academic freedom, which in some countries has really become an issue, in particular for younger researchers, the pressure to constantly growing demands and increasing competition faced by early careers, all that has an impact on the younger people. I mean, You know that, everybody, I don't say anything new. And what we observe is this is impacting the motivation. Many young people are stopping research and going to other jobs, and of course it has an impact on mental health. And I'm very happy to say here that there is a cost action dedicated to mental health. I used to be in a former time director of costs, and I have been working for building the cost association, which is now up and running since 2014. And I really believe that this kind of tools, these networks, which allow everybody in a pan-European approach to participate to networks, is like I always was saying at that time, is first connecting people, face-to-face is important. And secondly, of course, what is very important is if you enter a cost action in any field, you get like the key to all the key persons in the field, in the topic of the action. And this allows you to have some kind of spin-off projects, bilateral, multilateral, and you can apply for the European Union programs. You have much more chances to get, the results are proving that, the impact assessments, that you have a hugely increased chance to be selected because, of course, you build your project on a base of trust with the people you have been working with or connected through the cost action. And I see that ReMO is entering absolutely this approach. So we believe these researchers' issues are really happening since too long, and I know what I'm talking about because I was asked from where I come, and I was just giving my usual answer. I'm a European product. I have an Austrian name because I had an Austrian grandfather, but he left this country very young. And I was born in Spain, and I have been working in France, in Switzerland, in Belgium. And I was, of course, when I was a young scientist, confronted to these precarious situations. I left Spain because at that time in Spain there were no jobs, there were no money for research. It was still some years after Franco's death, so after 40 years of authoritarian government. So I know what I talk about. I have been for many years having very short, very badly funded projects. So and I see that things have improved because now we have Erasmus, we have Marie Curie, we have the ERC. All that things didn't exist some years ago. That's I was always striving for helping and supporting the creation of these support programs. But still, the situation in the field is this only part of the scientists have access to that, and we need to think about how to help researchers in a wider field. We cannot only fund the most excellent ones, we need everybody. That's my personal belief. So, and we have to find how to inspire and how to incite and motivate young generations and future generations to enter into research careers. So, a short summary of the manifesto. ReMO signed it, but I'm always reminding that each individual all over Europe and beyond Europe can sign it, because the more we have signatures, the better it is. So we have opened it to signatures of institutions, but also of individuals. Like I used to say, there is no risk with signing this document, because it's just claiming that we need to take care of early career researchers by monitoring, by improving the careers, by enhancing the sectors, and by involving national funding agencies, of course. That's just some pictures to say that we make it to bring young researchers in a very short time, because this event on the 10th of January I mentioned, where we hand over the manifesto to the commissioner, you see her on the left or in the middle, was very important. We asked that we could invite young researchers so that they were representing the researchers' concerns, and not we as old representatives, senior representatives. And it was really very successful, and we were very happy that we could make it. And of course we have a young commissioner. This makes also a difference. You really feel that she is aware of, that she listens, and she makes the link also between education and higher education, which is very important. So now, 2 slides. I'm not an expert on mental health, even if I've been working for many years in neuroscience, but I've always been inspired of these problematics. The only thing, and I have been working, by the way, with psychiatrics when I was in the last years. But mental health is very often associated precisely to, wow, this person has to go to the psychiatric hospital and has to stay there 3 years. And in fact, we are talking about something more difficult to measure, which is how all what we mentioned already, which has an impact on our daily concerns, how this impacts our careers, our will to continue working on research, for example, but also on anything else. So in fact, I didn't invent anything. I took a copy-paste out of the link you find at the end, but I added something. It's all these external events such as war, earthquakes, climate change, etc., which in these official documents for the moment, except of the COVID pandemic, are not yet very much mentioned. So we have to make this different people working on this aware of what it is. Now I'm just reminding two things, is that of course the World Health Organization has understood that there is an issue on mental health which goes beyond the usual psychiatric approach. And of course the OECD, this was mentioned by the Dean of the University this morning. And what here my intention is just to say, yes, the institutions are little by little and the national governments taking awareness out about these issues, but certainly not enough. And so we have to really, I think the ReMO is a very interesting initiative, but of course we need to provide the policymakers, the World Health Organization, the OCDE, the European Commission and others with data. And that's what we heard today, that there are more and more studies about these things, because that's also the role of researchers, is to provide factual, neutral, objective data and to do the explanation for the policymakers to understand how to use this data to take the right decisions. This is not only mental health, this is in any field. I mean, so some succeed better than others. So we call for action, and of course within what we call mental health should be part of what should figure in these different documents. First, we asked for defining a European framework for research careers. In fact, in 2011 there was already a text, and then, like usual, something happened and nothing happened. That means that nothing happened. So we are calling this to take this work up again and to really put in place a kind of framework where all the stakeholders, and I used to say public and private, we need companies also to adhere to this kind of processes, to understand that there is an issue we have to take up. The second thing is this European Research and Innovation Careers Observatory. Well, we didn't put innovation, but the Commission is always adding innovation, but well, this means it includes companies. The idea is mainly that we need a place where there is staff with enough resources, not only for themselves to do some research activity about how, or some collecting of data about researchers' careers, mobility was mentioned widely by Murat, but also to gather all the existing studies, because you never have enough aware about what exists, and then you need indeed a kind of scientific approach or research approach and effort to gather this and to analyze the documents and see where are the gaps, what do we need. We listened about the slides from Murat, which happily enough were half in English, this Royal Society study, but is always only UK doing studies or other countries doing studies, put right on the studies done elsewhere, not always the unique example of UK. The last thing, the third thing I really very much want to underline, you put on your slide, Murat, the gap of human resources or something like that. And I thought, wow, that's exactly what I think. But then you had your ReMO and human resources were not mentioned. We need in the universities and research organizations skilled and professional human resources departments. And I say it's human resources, it's not about administrative aspects. It's people who are able to understand what mobility means for an individual, because it is indeed very good for our careers. I have been moving around, it was more or less quite good for my career. I published a lot and I had a good chance for having nice bosses and so on. But still, it is very difficult. When you're alone, when you have a partner, it becomes a bit more difficult. But the difficulties are not the same. I mean, you have always, when you are with a partner, you are not alone, but when you are alone, you are really alone, and you have to find a way to integrate, and to get new friends and so on. What happens beyond the frontiers of the lab is something which has to be taken into account. If you have children, Brian mentioned it, what the difficulties, additional difficulties sometimes are. How can you be a competitive researcher if you have to take care of children? And now men are more and more involved in taking care of children, so finding the balance in the couple is something very important. That is all about human resources. Bullying and the problematics of harassment in some situations, that's a matter of human resources. So we need, I believe, skilled people who can help the scientists. The one who harasses also, because the person who harasses most of the time is not aware of this. So this person needs also help to manage the situation, because the pressure is so hard on everybody that this person might also have mental health issues which nobody is aware of. And the last thing is, of course, this new dedicated program the Commissioner has announced, which she called a partnership, where we don't know yet enough what is meant with that. What she thinks is that, of course, member states need to commit and engage in that, because the positions are at national level, that's not the European Commission, so that those who are responsible with the rules and whatever else are the national authorities, and of course the employers, that means the universities, the research organizations, the companies. Last but not least, I mentioned that everybody can sign the manifesto, so here a little QR code if you want to use, or the link to our website, it's still online. I'm checking every week some new people are signing.